Hello, friends. It's your host, Hannah MacDonald, and I am just popping on to let you know that this is the final podcast episode before a little summer break. So I will be taking a couple of weeks off now until the 28th of August, when I will return with a debut spotlight episode with the brilliant Bruce Omar Yates to chat about his debut novel, The Muslim Cowboy. I hope you've enjoyed all of the episodes that we've had so far this year, and I am just very much in need of a relaxing break. And I hope that you'll be joining us for our return on the 28th of August. But in the meantime, there will be an extra episode for all patrons. So if you would like to support the podcast, I would appreciate it so much. It will only cost you less than £3 a month to gain an extra episode a month and to also gain early access to all episodes. It also gives you the chance to submit questions for author interviews, and you can find our Patreon over at patreon.com/a pair of bookends. Our patrons will be receiving an extra episode this month, but for all of our other lovely listeners, you will have to wait until the 28th of August. But hopefully it's worth the wait, and I shall see you soon. Enjoy your summer. Welcome to A Pair of Bookends, the book club you can carry anywhere. I'm your host, Hannah MacDonald, and I'll be bookending the conversation with some of the most exciting voices from the bookish world. Welcome to our summer bonus episode. Today I am thrilled to be joined by Claire Daverley to chat all about her debut novel, Talking at Night, her journey as a debut author, and to get the lowdown on what is on her summer reading pile. Claire will also be answering questions submitted by some of you lovely lot, so thank you so much to those who have written in. Claire is a writer based in Scotland. After graduating from the University of Oxford with a degree in fine art, she began a career in publishing, writing about books by day and penning her own at night. Her debut novel, Talking at Night, was published last year by Penguin Michael Joseph to much acclaim. It was a Waterstones Best Book of 2023, named as one of Independent's 10 Best Summer Reads, and was shortlisted for Book of the Year in the debut fiction category at the British Book Awards 2024. I absolutely adored this book, and I am so excited for this conversation. Welcome, Claire, to A Pair of Bookends.
Oh, Hannah, thank you. That was just amazing hearing you list up the stuff. I'm like, really? Was that my book?
That
Wow.
was your book. It really was. Now,
Oh,
I've already told you how much I loved your book, but before we dive in, I have to ask a very important question, which is, what are you currently reading?
so I actually just finished a book this morning, called Breakdown by Kathy Sweeney.
Oh my gosh, I want this book so much.
I absolutely loved it. I absolutely loved it.
Stop.
But, we were just before we were recording, we're talking about our favorite kind of sort of book browsing, and we buy a lot in sort of charity bookshops. This was one of these things where I actually hadn't heard of it, and I walked into this beautiful independent bookshop in Edinburgh, Portobello Books, and I saw it on the table. And I know you're not meant to judge books by their cover, but
But
everybody,
that cover is amazing.
the cover was amazing, and the title just really grabbed me. I knew nothing about it. I read the back, and I was like, it's just a spontaneous purchase. I bought it there and then, and I devoured it within a couple of days. It's about a woman in her, I would say maybe late 40s, early 50s, who's got two older children throughout their late years of school or early years of college. And she just walks out one day. She just walks out of her life and her home. And it's just incredibly unsettling, but also incredibly beautiful. And it's like a mediation on motherhood and what it is to be a woman. And it really blew me away. And also Breakdown is just such a clever title because it kind of has different layers of meaning once you've read the book. So anyway, I would recommend everybody immediately go and buy it.
Oh no, I'm gonna have to buy it, aren't I?
What a shame. Another book for the shelf.
Another book. I was telling Claire before we started recording that my TBR pile is getting so high that we are very much in danger of killing one of my cats right now. But this book sounds like it'll be worth it, so I'm excited for that. And I have seen the cover, it's amazing.
Yeah, and the writing is just so, it's really sparse, it's really original. It's doing something that, I've not seen a novel do before. And that's what I love often when I'm reading something. If it can turn your head and you don't feel like you're actually reading a book, it feels like you're hanging out with someone really going through something,
Mhm.
understanding them as a human and not thinking of them as a character at all, but as a real person. And that is absolutely what she does with this book.
You've got me so excited. This is dangerous, Claire. We've How many more books are you going to add to my TBR pile today? We shall
Yeah,
see.
I apologize in advance.
Let's get on to your novel, Talking at Night, which, as I said in my intro, received much acclaim, and I believe it has sold in 24 countries, but it could be more by now. What has your journey as a debut author been like, and at what point did you realise, like, was there a specific moment when you realised that it was becoming a success?
That's a really great question. And I think surreal is like the one word I would use. And it's, it's a few years down the line now because obviously you get the book deal and then it takes a good year. And even then that was quick by publishing standards for it to actually be out in the world once you've done all your copy editing and everything. But it was a really slow burn for me as a writer. I'd had lots and lots of rejections over the years, and I was trying for a long time, 6, 7 years, to even land an agent. So that was one really wonderful moment where you kind of finally feel as if you might be on the right path when an agent signs you. But then, strangely, once Talking at Night was finished, it all then happened very, very quickly. So it felt like it was years and years of failing. And then essentially overnight, the manuscript went out and it was preempted by all these different publishers and selling in all these different countries. So, like you say, 24 territories. That all happened within sort of the first week of the book going out to editors. So that was just completely, I look back on it now and like it was just totally boggling. I didn't really have any understanding of what was going on. It was a week of complete like sleep deprivation and, celebration, but also complete confusion. And I felt very kind of removed from it. It was like very exciting and it felt successful in terms of, oh my gosh, all these publishers are buying it. You don't actually know how it's going to go down until it's in the hands of readers. And that was, 18 months down the line. So when you sort of say, when did I get an idea of how successful it would be? I think I'm still questioning whether I can say it's successful because it's just so, it's like a self-preservation thing, I
Of
think.
course.
And actually the real success, I suppose, if I'm really honest, comes from talking to real readers and seeing how much they've connected with the book and all those amazing things you said at the start of this episode. It's like, wow, I kind of forget that all of that's happened because I keep myself at a remove from all of those things because really I just care about writing a story that,
Mhm.
someone's really going to connect with. So it's when I get those messages, sliding into my DMs from readers or they queue to get their book signed at an event and, tell me something really personal about how they
Mm.
connected with them. And I think those are the moments really where you think, oh, I've done something here that means something to someone. And that's really special.
I came to your event in Manchester at the Waterstones on Deansgate, and you were interviewed by the lovely Martha. We love Martha on this podcast,
We did.
and
Shout out to Martha.
we love her. And I was telling you before that I hadn't started the book when I came to the event, and I was really panicking that somebody was going to spoil it for me because everyone that was sat in the audience waiting for you to come out was speaking about the book with such enthusiasm. And I was like, gosh, these people really love these characters in this book. And I was like, if anybody spoils anything, I'm going to be so upset. But there was people coming up to you. I was watching people in the queue approach you, and people were giving you bracelets, and they'd made TikToks about the characters, and
I
that
know.
was such a wonderful feeling because I know that this hasn't been an easy journey for you because you had written two books prior to this one, hadn't you?
I had, yeah. So as I said, it was sort of years of trying and failing and picking myself up again. So I had two books sort of still in the drawer that didn't land an agent, and Talking at Night was sort of third time lucky. So you're right to get that sort of, and I think that perhaps part plays into that sort of feeling of, is this really happening to me? And is this really my book? And you sort of feel as if it's gonna maybe all have been an illusion, or at some point you'll realize it wasn't actually real. And so when there's people handing you Taylor Swift style friendship bracelet about your Talking at Night novel. It's just like really, really surreal. And I hold it all very lightly. Like I'm so grateful and it's just so amazing. But that stuff can go to your head probably. So I'm kind of like, no, it's all about the work and writing something really good a second time and see if I can stay in the game.
I 100% believe you can stay in the game, and I know that I'm not alone in saying that. I am very excited for more books from you. I'll be pre-ordering those immediately, whenever you decide to publish
Thank
them.
you. Thank you. That's
I
super.
say slightly impatiently.
I've got my one sale in the bag. I'll tell my publisher, Michael Joseph.
So let's start. Could you tell the listeners that haven't come across Talking at Night yet what Talking at Night is about?
Of course, spoiler free, of course.
Spoiler phrase, please. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll continue Martha's wonderful legacy of keeping spoilers
Yes.
off the door. So, Talking at Night is what I would categorize as contemporary fiction. And it is about two people, Will and Rosie, who are wildly different characters and they meet in their final year of school. And despite being wildly different, they sort of strike up this instant connection or chemistry, which sadly is sort of shattered in the light of an unexpected tragedy that happens one summer just before Rosie is due to go to university. And it's that tragedy that not only tears them apart, but draws them back to one another again and again over the sort of 20 or so years that the novel then spans. So while it starts in their sort of teen years, it ends when they're sort of in their mid-30s. And it's a book that explores love and grief and mental health. And it's a love story, first and foremost, but not just about romantic love, I think it's fair to say.
Yes, it definitely explores multiple types of love, and you write love so beautifully. And as you said, at the center of the novel is this tragic event. And as we said, we're going to keep this spoiler free, so I'll do my best here. But there is this tragic event that upends the characters' lives, and as you said, it does tear them apart, but it also binds them together. What do you think it is about grief specifically that brings people together?
I think grief is one of those things that is just so universal. It's like it's pretty inevitable that we are all going to experience it, if not the only inevitable thing that we're all going to experience. And I was interested in that as a writer, how we can all experience it slightly differently. It can be a different shape to all of us depending on our connection to the person who's died. But it is a universal feeling. And I was also interested in how it shapes who we are if it happens at a particular point in our lives.
Mhm.
So the actual sort of logistics of the tragedy that happens in the book, shall we say, it's a very pivotal point of both Rosie and Will's lives. And I wanted to see how something like that occurring in the middle of a love story could both be a hindrance, but also something that means they will forever be connected to each other in this very unique way. And I was really interested in the push-pull of that. And I think there's a lot of push-pull that goes on with grief specifically.
Yeah.
There's probably a lot of joy in grief because there's so much to do with memory and, love as well. You can't have grief if there wasn't love in the first place. So to me, that was what drew me to writing about it.
Gosh, you said that so beautifully, and it reminded me of, there are moments in the book, it's so difficult to not spoil anything, but there are moments in the book when, they're not only talking about their grief, but they're talking about like preserving a memory of a person and the way that we preserve that memory and the way that people are spoke about in, the aftermath. And, that is something that brings them together, but also, it's powerful, like you said, in the way that it can tear them apart. And I feel like I'm teetering on the edge of a spoiler, so I'm not going to dip into what I was about to say. It's too dangerous. It's dangerous territory. Good God. But I want to ask about this whole push and pull, not just about grief, but about this will they, won't they sort of romance. And as you said, it spans 20 years. Why did you want us as readers to sort of follow this timeline? And did you ever feel frustrated by the choices that Will and Rosie were making?
I think I always knew that I didn't want to write quote unquote kind of a teen love
Yeah.
story. So really the time spanning just came out of a necessity to make sure I was with these characters
Hmm.
for a long time. But there was also, I knew that I wanted them to meet at school because there was all that nostalgia and
Mm.
intensity of meeting someone when you're a teenager. You know, just biologically, you're feeling things you've never felt before. You know, the hormones are crazy, but
Hmm.
also that there is genuinely something about your neurology when you're a teenager where you feel things with more intensity than a child or an adult can or will. So that was really fascinating to me. So I knew it had to start there, but I also, like we've just talked about, that idea of something enduring
Yeah.
was something I really wanted to focus on. But of course, there is no story as well if two characters meet, fall in love, hit it off, the end. There's, kind of nothing interesting about that to anybody. So I also knew there had to be conflict, there had to be points of conflict, there had to be an ebb and flow of this relationship over, the 20 years. So you asked about whether I was frustrated. I think it was more about a balance of making it believable. They couldn't just stick together like glue, but I also couldn't keep them apart because then
Hmm.
they'd be two separate stories. So there was almost this beating heart that was, Will and Rosie at the center of this story while their lives kind of unfold and continue happening. So I think it was like it was doing a little dance between how satisfying can I keep it without it being absolutely maddening, but also how realistic can I make it, because I wanted it to feel realistic, inevitable, surprising, all these things which can be very hard to do with the sort of will they, won't they trope.
Hmm.
And I think what helped was I never set out to write a will they, won't they love story. I just wanted to write a story about two people who'd been through this really tough, devastating thing. And the love story kind of came out of that desire to explore that. So frustration's probably not the word, more just hopeful that I
Yeah,
pulled it
but
off.
they feel so real and human, Will and Rosie, and I think that's such a talent to create characters like that where you feel like you know them and you feel like you know these people because people do make stupid choices and make mistakes and say the wrong thing and do the wrong thing, or they don't tell the truth when they really want to. And there's a lot of those complex, complicated choices made in the book, and I really loved that you kept those in because, like I said, it made them feel even more real. How do you go about writing characters and creating characters that feel real, and why do you think so many readers have connected with these two characters specifically?
Well, thank you for saying that, because they felt very real to me, and you don't know that that's going to translate when people read it.
I
So
miss
that's
them so much.
oh, that's so lovely. So do I.
I'm not surprised.
Oh, the morning after the book deal happened, like my husband and I were lying in bed, and I like turned to him and said, "I know this sounds mad, but I really feel like I need to hug Will and Rosie.
Oh.
It's all they're doing. It's not mine, and they just felt so real." But anyway, sidetrack. I mean, I wish I had a really kind of smart answer that made me sound super intellectual and like I know exactly what I'm doing as a writer, but I don't, is the answer. But I like people. I've always been a bit of a sort of observer, and I am quite an introvert as well. So I've spent a lot of years just listening to
Mhm.
people and reading a lot of novels very closely and thinking a lot about storytelling and percolating what is interesting about a person on a page. So with all that being said, it isn't super intentional. I don't sit down and kind of map out character sort of mind maps or anything like that. It's kind of like we were talking about how do you choose what to read next, and we were saying it's all
Yeah.
about feeling. I get perhaps like a whisper or a feeling of a character, like a voice or something they might say, and then I just sit with that for a long time and I let them sort of unfold in the background, and I might scribble things down. So, Will and Rosie were born as these two characters that I listened to for a good 6 years before I sat and mapped their story out. So I think because I gave them that time and that space,
Mhm.
they sort of just grew in the background, which was really lovely because I did feel as though when I came to write them, I was very clear on their motivations and their desires and their fears. And sometimes just letting that happen organically is the nicest thing to be able to give yourself as a writer, that time to sort of not even actively work that out, but allow the characters to do that for you in a way. And I think why they've been connected with, I couldn't say. I think it helps that Will Wright is absolutely delicious.
That's very true.
And he's a great cook, and there's just all these wonderful things about him. I think Rosie she's a bit of an every woman in that I think that real desire to get things right and be perfect, and in a way that we all know perfect is an illusion, yet it's still something that we're shooting for, or
Hmm.
something we're conditioned to believe as women. It is our responsibility to be perfect in every way and to also put everybody else before ourselves. I think that is quite this is a generalization, but quite a female
No, I
thing.
think you're right. Yeah.
And I think perhaps people related to Rosie in that respect. And also, it sounds really obvious, but they're both so flawed. Like, they're both good people, as you said, Hannah, making bad decisions.
Hmm.
And isn't that just most of us on the
Yeah.
planet? Like, we're all just trying to be good people and do the right thing, and we're often getting it wrong. And it's just the most human thing.
Yeah, it is. And,
Us.
there's multiple things that come into play, about good people making bad choices. It can be age, it can be, what their life looks like in that period of time. What does their family life look like? What is going on in their lives outside of this dynamic that is causing them to think and react in this way.
Exactly. And that was maybe going back to sort of your original question, is what made them feel kind of real and believable to
Hmm.
me. It's like, it was not just these two people having this sort of relationship. It was like there were loads of other relationships sort of spinning around them and making up
Hmm.
their background and their lives, and they're just and informing their decisions, and you sort of see Rosie's sort of mother's influence
Yeah.
on how she feels she needs to be and conduct herself. And you know that Will's got these sort of abandonment issues
Yeah.
because he is raised by his grandmother and not his parents. And there's all this stuff that kind of feeds in to why they are the way they are and why they make the choices they do.
Hmm.
So they're perhaps frustrating choices, you can kind of appreciate why they're being made. And I think that for me, when I was writing them, was like there was never a point where I had to sort of scratch my head and think, oh, what would Will do in this situation? Or why would that happen to Rosie? There was no sort of shoehorning to be done, because their backgrounds and their history felt very sort of solidified.
I really was interested in, and I think this is such a delicate topic to write and to explore, but you did it so well. And I think there's only kind of, as somebody that's experienced, poor mental health. Sorry, I should have said started with that is what I was going to speak about. But, as somebody that's experienced poor mental health, I always feel quite, I don't know what the right word might be, but I'm always kind of worried about how an author's going to tackle that subject once I kind of understand that that's the kind of road that they're going down. And I think you also mentioned this book at the Waterstones Manchester event, but one of my favourite books is Sorrow and Bliss by Meg Mason. And yeah, that book is just beautiful, and I loved the way that she wrote about stop.
Literally sat on my desk as one of my five sitting here. It's one of my favorite books ever written.
Me
So
too, me too. Okay, I love that. I love that. And that makes so much sense to me now because and that's not just to say, sorry, that Meg Mason would have influenced the way that you wrote
no,
this,
no, of
but
course, no.
this was one of the books alongside Sorrow and Bliss that I felt tackled that subject really well. And, they are living with poor mental health, and, they each have their own things going on that's sometimes as a result of this complex grief that they're experiencing, and other times it's from other things that are going on. And I don't want to spoil too much, but I was curious in the way that you explored Rosie and what she was going through, because she's a character that has OCD. And I don't know if that's the right wording of it, so forgive me if it's not. But I wanted to ask what drew you to exploring a character living with this condition.
Yeah, of course. Well, thank you for kind of saying all of that, because it was something I was very mindful about when
Hmm.
I was writing. It's something that's really close to my heart that I really wanted to get right as well. So, and shout out to Soren Bliss, because it is one of my favorite.
Amazing.
But but I feel as though the dialogue about or around mental health has come on in leaps and bounds in recent years, in fiction, in film, in just sort of contemporary conversation. But it still has a really long way to go.
Hmm.
And I felt as if I really wanted to get very granular and specific about certain conditions, OCD being one of those. And I wanted that sort of, I wanted to challenge sort of certain stereotypes. So people throw around the term like, oh, I'm a bit OCD because I like things clean, or, you know, and it's actually really, it shows a bit of an insensitivity, but also a complete misunderstanding about what it is that these conditions can and do look like. I wanted to normalize certain conditions, but also open up that discussion and make people sort of feel either less alone or more, you know, it's not just about washing hands constantly or flicking light switches on and off, which is perhaps what TV shows it as. I wanted it to show that I wanted to show that these things, whether it's OCD or something else like depression or insomnia or whatever, they shapeshift and they sort of manifest differently for different people. And there's a sliding scale of these things as well. And I don't think that sort of nuance is really explored often in fiction. And you said it beautifully. Sorrow and Bliss really did showcase that. I think there's a lot of high functioning people out there really suffering with their mental health. And yet, because you're high functioning and you're going to work and you're succeeding in every way that it is sort of seen be succeeding, you can't be having a bad time of it. And actually, with Rosie's OCD and her almost clinical perfectionism, that also manifests in lots of other sort of anxiety-inducing ways. We are seeing this portrait of a person who seems as if she has everything together, but she really doesn't. And she is actually really unwell, really wants someone to just sort of see her and say, you know, hey, you're not okay, you know, or someone to ask her, why is it she's not sleeping? Because that isn't normal. And that doesn't happen. And I wanted to show the realities of that, I think, rather than, you know, oh, OCD is that you just like things clean, or anxiety is you're just having a panic attack in a supermarket, which of course those things can be true. But the specifics and the nuance of writing about that stuff was really important to me.
Well, like I said, you really did explore it beautifully, and I felt that her story resonated with me so much. I don't have experience with OCD, but I have experience with anxiety, and I'm definitely this high functioning person that will take on way too much and then kind of crash and burn out at certain points. And it's like you said, people see somebody essentially putting on a performance and, you know, trying to do multiple things at once, and they seem to be doing well, but how that feels on the inside is very different to how it looks on the outside.
And that was a beautiful way of putting it, actually, because I wanted Rosie to be kind of performing or presenting herself the way that, as well, she has been conditioned to present herself, not by her mother, but by society and, you know, a school who wants her to get the grades to go to Oxbridge, all of these things. And actually, the internal experience is very, very different for her. I'm really glad that that sort of chimed with you, but I am sorry that you've, you know, suffered anxiety yourself. It's the pits.
It is, it really is. Thank you. I want to get on to another character who I fully think this is one of the most special characters that I've read. And you can probably guess who I'm going to say, but it's Will's gran. And I absolutely adored her so much. I thought she was such a great addition to the cast. And I was really curious actually about what the inspiration was for her and why you wanted to write specifically about sort of this grandparent-grandson dynamic.
Funny enough, I didn't really sort of choose to do it. Again, it was one of those things where I started writing and Gran was just there. It was like she was his guardian, and I sort of just rolled with it. And actually it made sense because so much of his character is obviously around the fact that his mum and dad aren't on the scene. And as I started writing, I was like, this is actually really fascinating to me, because you've got Rosie with her very sort of tense, but also often quite tender relationship with her mum and her fairly oblivious absent dad. And then Will, in a way, has this much stronger, more nurturing relationship, but with someone who is not his actual parent. And I was sort of interested in the conflict or sort of contrast, I suppose, of those two things. But I was also just totally enamored with the idea that a grandparent can sort of be like a pal. Like they're
Yeah.
like a friend, really, but at the same time, she is his guardian.
Hmm.
And treading that line between them having a load of banter and her really putting him in his place as well when she needed to. But also she's very good at sort of knowing when he needs space. She's not as invasive as maybe a parent could be. Yeah, she's a friend almost.
And she
But
allows for him to make those mistakes and those bad decisions, doesn't she? She allows for that, which I
yeah.
don't feel like a parent would give you that space. They'd just be like, "What are you doing?"
I think you're right. I think she has a certain distance, which helps and allows Will to sort of as well be a very independent guy from the very off. But I actually, the scenes I love writing most were probably between Gran and Will. I just really, or even Gran and Rosie. Like I loved the relationship that sort of blossomed between the two of them as well.
Mm,
Just she brought some quite nice light relief to some otherwise fairly intense sort of, scene transitions
of
or
course.
dialogue. She was always fun. She was always fun to write.
And you feel like she's really rooting for Will and Rosie alongside you as the reader. And there's a moment, and I'm not going to say what the moment is, but there's a moment in the book when she cries as a result of something to do with the two of them, and you feel like you're crying with her. Well, I was,
That's so
because it feels the
true.
same despair that she's feeling.
Oh, that's such a clever observation because it's kind of like in TV, like if you're watching The Office or something, it's like Tim or Jim like looking at the camera is very
Yeah.
much the viewer. So yeah, Gran is like the
That's
reader.
what that's what's what Grant's
Yeah,
doing, isn't she? She's giving us
pulling
the
her hair
offside.
out. Yeah.
I love her so much. I wanted to ask before I get on to other topics to do with, we have to ask you for more book recommendations and we need to get on to listener questions. But I wanted to ask you about the setting of the book, which feels like quite an important thing because, they live by the sea, they meet at the lighthouse, that's their thing. Why did this type of setting feel perfect for this story?
So many reasons, so many reasons. I think I always knew it had to be set by the sea. There was something just so sort of pertinent and fitting about the romanticism of, these coastal walks they could go
Mm,
on. And also just the symbolism of like the ebb and flow of the ocean kind of reflected the ebb and flow of Will and Rosie's relationship and this idea that they would always come back to each other, but then sort of have to break away again. So I started knowing it had to be set by the sea. And then Norfolk itself was just one of those places that I knew quite well. So I've never lived there, but I holidayed there a lot when I was younger. And I've got family that live there now. So there was sort of a lot of actual specific geographical locations that I could draw on. And there's, again, back to that romanticism, it's got the pine forests, it's got these incredible, like almost empty beaches with these really staggering sunsets. And there's kind of a vastness, but also a privacy to Norfolk that
hmm.
felt really right for this book. And again, without going into specifics, it had to be there for the tragedy that
Yeah,
occurs as well.
of course.
So those were all the reasons why. And it was quite nice actually, because I wrote it in lockdown. So I always felt like I was escaping to the sea when we weren't allowed to escape anywhere.
Hmm.
So I think the sort of the yearning as well that a lot of people talk about feeling when they're reading the book potentially came from this yearning just personally of like wanting to be outside and be on the beach and walking through these pine forests with these characters because I at the time couldn't leave the house. So maybe who knows, maybe that bled into the writing of it.
It definitely did. It felt very visceral, those moments when they were there, and you felt like you were with. I mean, you feel like you're with them the whole way through because it does feel so real. But specifically when when they're at the lighthouse, and it just feels, very cinematic and lovely. I have definitely taken up enough of your time chatting about your book, and there's plenty more I could have chatted about. I absolutely love this book, and yeah, I could chat to you about it for hours, like I said. The last thing I want to ask on the topic of your book is I think you mentioned at the Manchester event, and I'm not sure if anything's changed, but this book has been optioned for TV, hasn't it?
Yes, it has, yeah.
And are you allowed to reveal anything about that or no?
I'm actually not allowed to at this stage. I mean, what I can say for listeners is that it's super exciting. And again, the TV rights got sold that same week where all the international deals were coming in, and it was just ridiculous. Like I actually remember getting an email from my TV and film agent. I didn't even know I had a TV and film agent. They're asking me what my priorities
Surprise.
were. And it was just like, this can't get any funnier. Like, it was just so hysterical. And you'll know, obviously, Hannah, because you're an actor, but only I think something very small, like 5% of things on Option actually get produced and
Yeah.
made. So it's super exciting. And the production agency who are working on it are fabulous and they really love the book. And it's past a lot of sort of green light stages, but it still means there's a lot of stages to go
Of
through.
course, yeah. I
Who knows?
really think this story was so beautiful when translated to the screen. I
Thank
can
you.
see it. I mean, you write in this really visual way, so I think it will just translate really well. And
I did.
you've given them a very easy job, really.
Well, I hope you're right. Let's all collectively manifest because I do, I think very sort of visually. I studied art at uni
Of
and
course, yeah.
I am I saw it as quite a cinematic sort of piece as I was writing. So I hope you're right. And, you know, fingers crossed, but who knows with these things. It would be a lovely bonus if it did sell it to a streamer or a broadcaster or whatever the next stage would
We're
be.
manifesting it. We're manifesting it because
Thank you.
I would very much like to audition for a role in
I'll
this.
put you forward.
Dreamy,
Absolutely.
dreamy. Okay, as I said, I'd love to carry on talking about talking at night, but we have listener questions. But before we get onto those, we need to talk about summer reading to bring people some inspiration for when they listen to this at the start of August. So I want to know, first of all, what is on your summer TBR pile?
Oh, great question. Okay, so I've just finished Breakdown, as we talked about.
Yeah,
So I am about to start reading The Offing by Benjamin Myers.
yes.
Yeah, I actually got given it while I was on the paperback tour for Talking at Night because I was talking about the kinds of books that I love to read. And then this lovely bookseller at the end of an event like pressed it into my hands and was like, "You will love this. You have to read it," which was just so
That's
amazing.
so nice.
It was so wonderful. So I've only, well, I'll begin it this evening, but what I do know about it is sort of a tender love story of friendship between a sort of teenage boy and an old woman, I believe, during the kind of blazing summer of the Second World War. So that's definitely on my list. I'm very excited to
That
get my
sounds very good.
I've heard really amazing things about All the Colours of the Dark by Chris
Me
Whitaker.
too. I've been seeing that everywhere.
Yeah, so he isn't my sort of usual genre, but he was a really wonderful fan, an early fan of Talking at Night. And I'd love to delve into his work because I feel like if an author likes what you're writing, there's a chance there'll be some crossover
Yeah.
in the pulse of what they're writing too. So I can't wait to read that, All the Colours of the Dark. And I'm also intending to read, even though I know nothing about it, but I've been seeing it everywhere, Butter by
Yes.
Osaka Yuzuki. So those are all kind of pressing on my summer reads list. I'm not a very good summer reader in that my reading habits don't actually change. You know, lots of people are like, "Oh, I'll take something for summer." I am the kind of person that I read A Little Life on honeymoon. So
Claire, no.
yeah, I'm like,
Not a little lie.
I absolutely loved it, by the way. It really made the honeymoon even better. Oh, and of course, Blue Sisters by Coco
Yes.
is 100% on my summer reading list. I
It's on
love
mine as well.
Jim Frankenstein so much.
Me too.
And oh, okay, to redeem myself against reading A Little Life on Honeymoon, Sandwich by Catherine Newman.
Oh, I need to get to this.
So did you read We All Want Impossible Things?
No, and it's on my shelf. I've not got to it yet.
Goodness, I mean, Hannah, it's just so perfect. And I don't use the word perfect lightly. It's so brilliant, but very little life vibes in that you might not want to read it during the summer because it
Okay.
will make you cry. But Sandwich is very much a summer read. It's, set on a week on Cape Cod. So it's very much
Gorgeous.
picnics and sandwiches and like ridiculous arguments that this family are having at this like little rundown sort of holiday home they go to every single year. But it was so funny and it was so moving. And it was almost just like a little insight into a real family's summer holiday. And it was just like a little tonic. So I read that actually on my own holiday, and I would recommend that for anyone
Oh, I
wanting
can't wait to get to
a
this.
good
I feel
laugh.
like we have quite similar reading tastes, so
We
I'm going to
do.
be coming to you quite a lot now for
Yes,
recommendations.
please do. We can run through the
Oh,
bookshelves.
100%. Obviously, listeners can't see this, but the bookshelves behind Claire are just incredible. I'm obsessed with them. So I I'm planning a trip that Claire is not
Do
given
it.
the okay to.
Open door. It's
I'm just
fun. We're
turning
going
up at your house. Claire, let me see the bookshelves. I want to ask, obviously, we were talking before about receiving proofs, and I wanted to know if there are any proofs that you've received of books coming out in the next few months that you want to put on people's radar.
I actually have a proof shelf for this thing. I
Be
sort
free.
of by genre, obviously. There's method to the madness.
I love this.
Here we go. Yes, I recently read True Love by Paddy Crew.
It's on my shelf as well.
Yes, so it actually says July 2024, so it will probably be out by the time this podcast
Yes, yeah.
release.
Oh, they've just come out, so we're good, we're good.
We're good. It was beautiful. Again, quite a sad, slow burn of a love story.
We love those.
Yeah. I won't say too much about it because I don't want to spoil it, but
Okay.
very atmospheric and a really kind of surprising ending as well. But I would recommend it. So True Love by Paddy Crew. What else have we got going on? Is there any more? It is no longer a proof, but As Young as This by Roxy Dunn.
So good.
I read as a proof, and she actually very kindly interviewed me again when I was on paperback tour, and she is as wonderful in person as she was as a writer. But so have you read this one, Hannah?
Yeah, I had Roxy on the podcast. I absolutely loved that book, and
Oh,
obviously because of the acting stuff in there and the
oh,
life as an
okay.
actor, and but it's one of those like it's so hard to talk about that book without giving any spoilers, but it's so beautiful.
But yeah, and so if she's been on the podcast, your listeners will know. But for those who haven't heard that episode, yeah, it's obviously it's charting a young woman's life in the chapters that are sort of split in her head by the different romantic relationships.
It's so well done as well.
Fresh and so original, and yeah, I loved it. So those are my two proof recommendations for now.
I love that. And my last quick question is, what has been your favorite read so far this year?
Green Dot, hands down.
So good.
Oh my gosh, I just loved it. I feel like for any millennial who's ever had an office job, it's just
So good.
so cuttingly accurate. And I also just, it felt I actually reviewed it on my Instagram channel. I only ever put things that I really, really loved on my Instagram channel. And it was like, I think I said something like, it's like watching the Titanic go towards the iceberg
Yeah.
because it's you know what's going to happen, and yet you can't help kind of root for her, even
Yeah.
though she's kind of doing some fairly morally questionable things, but you're so on side with this amazing self-sabotaging narrator, and it's hilarious as
It's
well.
so good. We
So
had her on the podcast as well, and I just absolutely fell in love with her. I'm obsessed with her.
she has Manchester roots, doesn't she?
Yes,
I
yes.
feel like
She
she
studied
studied at
PhD, yeah.
yeah.
But she's just incredible, like exactly what you'd hope the writer of that book to be like. She's wonderful, and she's writing
I
the adaptation as well.
Oh, how fantastic. That's so brilliant. I mean, she's the only person who should really.
Of course.
Yeah, that's been my best book of the year so far. I read it in March, and I feel like it's going to be quite hard to beat, actually.
Very true, very true. So fair. I should probably get on to listener questions. I'm sorry, I know that I've kept you longer than I said.
Oh, this is so much fun.
So we've had some wonderful listener questions. Again, thank you. Over on Instagram, I will go through the Instagram one first. So we have at Tataguchi23. That's a very fun handle. Who asked 3 questions, so I will quick fire those. So, what is your writing routine?
Ooh, I think I used to have a writing routine. And now I'm lucky enough to do it as my sort of full-time job, it's much less routine led, weirdly. 'Cause you
Mhm.
have more time to do it, I suppose. But ideally, I always used to write early in the morning for my marketing job, and I still like writing early in the morning if I can. So I will set an alarm for sort of 6 a.m., but I'm a real early bird, so sometimes I'll wake before then anyway. So I could be
Wow.
at desk as early as 5. And I will light a candle just because there's an almost ritual element of
Hmm.
it. You sort of set an intention, okay, this is my private writing time. And I will write sort of, an hour, 2 hours before my husband gets up for work. And then I will walk the dog, which gives me that little bit of sort of thinking time about what I have written early in the morning. And then I'll get back to my desk after tea and breakfast about 9 o'clock, and I will write till lunchtime, or indeed edit what I've written the day before. So I always write chronologically. I might make notes or have notebooks filled with like ideas and sort of plot questions and scraps and things like that. But when it comes to sitting at my desk, it will be start to finish, chipping away. And yeah, early in the morning with tea and the sort of understanding that you might have a terrible day of writing, but then the next day might be better. So just non-negotiable as well.
I love that. I love the ritual of lighting a candle as well. I think that's such a nice thing to do for yourself.
Yeah, and
We
it's
love implementing self-care with work. That's great.
self-care has to happen. And it's funny, it was a very kind of meaningful thing when I wrote Talking at Night, because I used to burn a Norfolk coast smelling candle. So
Oh, I
again,
love that.
a very immersive experience. And I had this idea that I would burn a different scent for every novel I wrote. That really hasn't been a thing. Like, I just have to light a nice candle and just, get that. And who knows what the scent's going to be until you're at the end of a novel sometimes. So I
I
think I
love
just
this.
with the right candle for Talking at Night. But yeah, I think there's something about not being too precious about a
Yeah.
writing routine, because I think you can very easily find excuses not to write or beat yourself up if the conditions aren't perfect.
Hmm.
I am very good at just writing anywhere. So, in the car or in a cafe or on public transport. When I first got my dog, when she was a puppy, the only way she would settle was if she was on my lap on the floor. So I wrote a lot of Talking at Night with the laptop like propped on a dining chair with her in my lap, sitting on the floor. And you just got to do what you got to do. And the
Exactly.
writing just has to get done. So ideally, desk, candle, lovely view, perfect, but not
Wonderful. And
not
I've
essential.
seen your view from Instagram and it looks incredible. So I'm very jealous. I think you've got the perfect writing spot there for yourself.
I am very jammy. Yeah, lovely place to be.
Do you have any advice for new writers?
Yes, keep going through rejection. Everybody gets rejected. All your favorite authors will have, I mentioned earlier in the podcast, but I had dozens of rejections from agents, which is sort of the first step. Before, if you want to be traditionally published through an actual publishing house, you need a literary agent first. And I used to print off every single rejection that I got and file them away in a
Hmm.
folder, because I felt like every no was maybe one step closer to a maybe, because that's what writing is. It's fearing and it's failing and it's getting back up and just carrying on. And I had a writing tutor once who said to me that writing isn't all about talent or luck. It's mostly about grit and just determination and hard graft. And that really made sense to me, because it was kind of like, well, what's the alternative after you've been rejected by an agent or even a publisher further down the line, or even a fellow writer or something at a writing group? Because, rejection can take on lots of different forms. It can
Hmm.
be a horrible crit, from a writing group or something that leaves your ego and your sense of creativity feeling really bruised or in shreds. And for me, it was like, well, what's the alternative? Just not writing after that rejection. To me, that wasn't an option. So if you have to carry on despite the rejections and the self-doubt, just know you're doing the right thing. And remember the joy of it as well
Of
whenever you,
course.
I think, is, and something I try and remind myself of. No one's holding a gun to your head.
No.
Writing should be, and often isn't, but should be light and enjoyable. And whenever I'm having those sort of tricky, dark periods, which I think every sort of creative person will have, I try and recapture why it is I love doing it.
Mm.
So making space for that, I think, as a new writer, for sure.
I think that's great advice, and something that I would say as well, as an actor who has obviously experienced a ton of rejection and has to audition frequently and get turned down, and I'm very used to that. The thing that has kept me going and has kept me finding the joy is doing something creatively for myself outside of acting. I think it's really important to keep the joy of creativity going for you, is to do something specifically for yourself that isn't about earning money and isn't about, the work. It's just about yourself.
Yeah, such good advice. I have a special notebook that is for non-novel writing,
I
right?
love that.
Because it's like I hit a point, I can't think when it was between which rejection period it was, but I had lost the joy and I'd lost the sight of why I was doing it. And I was, trying to formulate a book that I thought, someone would buy so that
Yeah,
I it could be read. And it was like that isn't what I'm doing this for. And I decided to just sort of write scraps of things just for myself. And that was what then inspired me to carry on. So I think you're right. And even just doing something completely unrelated,
of course. Yeah,
acting or writing, even if it's, cooking or baking or, I do a lot of wild swimming. And it gets you out of your head.
yeah.
Weirdly, when you're trying to produce creative work, being out of your head is more important sometimes than being
Out of
in.
your head and into your body. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I love
exactly.
that. The next person that asked a question is at Alessa Dullinger. I think that's how you say it. They asked, what was most important for you to get right in the story so that it be relatable and real?
I think we obviously discussed this before with the sort of mental health thread
Of
throughout.
course, yeah,
So just to sort of go back to that without repeating
of
myself.
course.
But it does explore OCD, like we said, and anxiety, but also depression as well. And I think I tried to shed light on how these things can so often weave into the texture of our lives and don't need to define us. And these things that are conditions and perhaps long lasting for people, they won't necessarily ever be fixed or gone. They're much more likely to fluctuate and be a small part of who we are.
Hmm.
So I wanted to get that right. Although it's important to note with this stuff, as we've sort of said, there often is no right or wrong or black and white depictions of what any particular mental health condition will look like for a different person, for any different person.
Hmm.
So I suppose I wanted these different experiences on a sliding scale to feel real or representative in some way, and just handled, delicately and with respect. So I've had a
Yeah.
lot of lovely messages from readers saying they felt like I got it right. So fingers crossed.
There is a lot of, you do write very thoughtfully and you do handle those topics with a lot of respect. And I think you do very well to avoid stereotyping people with particular experiences. And, that goes to say with the drinking as well. I don't think that's too much of a spoiler to say that, there is a character that has an issue with drinking. And I think, you do very well in the way that you explore that. So I think I would put that forward as well.
Thank you. Yeah, it sounds like a barrel of laughs, doesn't it, this novel?
But it is. It's brought so many people so much joy. It's such a beautiful book.
Thank
But
you.
you do explore all these things, and it's life. That's life. That's what we all go
Really.
through.
And
So
that's what I wanted to do when I was writing. And it's the kind of book I love to read. It's that novel that treads both light and dark.
for sure.
And those sort of really those Hollywood moments that take you out of your body, and that's what fiction does best. But then at the same time ground you and be like, this is real life. I wanted to try and write a book that sort of pinged between those two extremes, I guess.
Which you did so wonderfully. Another person on Bookstagram is at Jordan Zuck's Books, who at first said, not a question, but will you tell her I love her books so much? And
Oh,
then and then she said, curious if she plans to tour the US.
oh, I wish. Yeah, the tours and stuff are very much driven by the publishers. So if it was down to me, I would be there in a second. So if readers would like me to tour the US, please do write to my publishers and Dorman Books at Penguin in the US, or indeed just ask all their friends to buy copies of Talking at Night over there. Every copy helps, and I would love to. So fingers crossed one day.
I want to come on a bookish trip with Claire to the US because I feel like we would have an absolute riot traipsing around the bookshops there. So
Yeah, just do a bookshop trawl. That would be
I'm
amazing.
coming in your suitcase, Claire.
Yeah, do it.
over on Twitter, we had at VDLCL said, what does she hope everyone who reads her book takes away from it?
Ooh. Well, on a very sort of basic level, I really hope they love reading it as much as I loved writing it. We said before how, Will and Rosie they feel very real to me. And just as a kind of voracious reader, is there anything better than when you're sinking into a novel that feels just so all-encompassing that
Mhm.
you feel a bit at a loss when you sort of close the book and you're surprised that these people aren't real? And I really, really hope that readers, feel that way about Will and Rosie, but Gran as well. And, if they have hopes and dreams for these characters once the book's shut, I'd be pretty thrilled. But then beyond that, and I suppose this is something that again came out of being on the paperback tour and at the event that you came to, Hannah, is in the signing queues, readers have been saying some really meaningful things to me that I would never have expected, about how the book for one person, it, made her, she actually said this, pay closer attention to her own dreams, which
Oh,
was
I love that.
beautiful thing that anybody could have said, or what they want out of life has been sort of solidified by what they've read, or that is all pretty staggering stuff to me, because I just wanted to write a good story. I wanted to write something that felt real and sort of close to the truth of what it feels like to live in this kind of strange, wonderful, difficult world. So for all these readers to sort of say that it had impacted them in a way I didn't really ever expect, that's been amazing. And so I suppose I can say I hope that more people feel really, really touched by it in a way that I would never have anticipated unless, a few people had already said it to me.
Well, this book has touched me in many ways, and I absolutely adored it. And I urge anybody that hasn't read this yet to order yourselves a copy. I will be popping a link in the show notes, but it is out now in paperback and it's available wherever you get your books. Last question, where can my listeners find you on social media if they don't already follow you?
Of course, I'm not brilliant at social media, but I am more often than not to be found on Instagram at Claire Daverley. I'm also on Twitter with the same handle, but I don't really go there that often. So yeah, if you want to say hey, slide into my DMs and I'll be posting about all the books I love on there as well.
I love that. Thank you so much for all of your recommendations today, Claire, and thank you for joining me for this gorgeous conversation.
Thank you for having me, Hannah. Can I just stay forever and just talk all night about books?
Please, you can come back every summer. Let's do that.
I'm not going to hold you to that. You're going to regret saying that.
Absolutely not. I've loved this so much. And if our listeners have enjoyed this too, please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe as it helps to boost us in the charts. And if you want to give me a follow, you can do so at A Pair of Bookends Pod on Instagram and at A Pair of Bookends on Twitter and TikTok. That is all we've got time for. This has been great. I am very much in love with Claire and I'm in love with talking at night. So thank you once again. And thank you for listening. Goodbye.